I believe. And okay, one moment. Still logging in. Okay, we'll let some more people come into the room and then we will get started. All right. Okay, so let me share my screen. And let's see, share. Okay, so you should be able to see my screen. Let me blow this up a little bit. And as I said, we're going to go through tonight, probably it won't be more than 30, 40 minutes, going through sleep and circadian rhythms, specifically talking about what the system is. In other words, what is this sort of rhythmic type of clock, internal clock that we have? Obviously, we know that we get tired at a certain time, that we wind down as the day goes by, and we go to sleep and then we wake up. We're aware of that, but a lot of us are not really aware of the various different things that are associated with this system. So we'll talk about sleep. We'll talk about the autonomic nervous system, inflammation, aging, what happens when you have good sleep, sleep hygiene, which we brought up briefly before, and then a brief summary. So let's just jump right into it. So the circadian rhythm, the system, the clock, is essentially regulating the things that we are aware of: sleep and wake, obviously, hunger and satiety. So that is on a clock, which basically means that if you eat off of the rhythms that you're on, that you can disrupt things, as well as body temperature. You have a certain body temperature in the morning, during the day. This varies in temperature when you sleep, obviously. And all this is set by light inputs into the retina, which basically means that it's important for us in the morning to be able to get some sort of light into our eyes. And I believe it's actually very important to go outside and to get some early morning sunlight directly into your eyes, not looking directly into the sun, but just being outside and receiving the natural light inputs that we evolved with. Indoor lights, which I've spoken about in previous classes, aren't going to mimic the sun in any way. In fact, there's so many different kinds of lights that we're exposed to now that disrupt these signals. So in the morning, the most important thing to get your system set is to get some early morning natural sunlight onto your body. And so all of this is set by light inputs into the retina, which basically means that you're going to see how really important that is. I mean, think about it this way. You have light that goes into your retina, which is basically communicated down to the cellular level, which basically means that this light is setting something in your brain, which is then communicating all the way down to a cellular level, meaning that it's influencing, believe it or not, gene expression, the way your cells produce proteins for general upkeep, the cell cycle regulation, how your cells divide, nutrient sensing and utilization, which basically means if you are in a, sensing of food and using it, metabolism, detoxification, immunity, and inflammation, all of these are set by light inputs into the retina. So if we realize that all those things are sort of narrowing down into the cell just by light, we start to have a better respect for how important light is into our overall health. So in the morning, you want to get a nice, good burst of natural sunlight. Even if it's cloudy out, you're still going to be getting a broad spectrum of lights that are from the sun and still going to be beneficial. Looking through the window is going to be helpful, but just get outside if you can. There are age-related changes to sleep. There is basically reduced sleep as you get older. In other words, not because of it used to be everyone used to say, well, as you get older, you don't need as much sleep. Actually, that's not true. You have a reduced ability to sleep. It's not a reduced sleep need. So what happens is the quality and there's a deterioration in sleep quality as you get older, but you still need to maintain good sleep. And believe me, by the end of tonight's class, you're going to realize how important it is to really look at your overall health and think of ways to incrementally improve the quality of things. That's always what I've repeated over and over again, that if you're eating a certain food, can you find it in a more nutrient dense fashion, whether that might be organic or growing your own or buying from a local farm or any of those sorts of things. Well, the same thing goes when it comes to sleep. Yeah, maybe your sleep is decent. Maybe you feel like you have a good night's sleep every night. Well, that doesn't mean that you can't improve it in some way. And what I would like to say to you is that, well, if you say to yourself, well, I sleep well, I feel like I sleep well, what's the point of me improving my sleep? And I would refer back to all of these things that are happening: gene expression, protein translation, cell cycle, metabolism, detoxification. All of these types of things are going to be communicated all the way down. And you, meaning that if when we go through what happens with the quality of your sleep, you'll understand why, even if you feel like your sleep is decent, you might want to consider making some let me just, getting a question. Hold on one second. Having trouble seeing your question, so just 1 second. Okay. Let's see. Shadi is asking about miracle noodles on the keto diet, and yes, they are keto friendly. Yes. Okay, so let's get back to this and get into sleep. So, what are the age-related changes? So we spoke about this sort of reduced sleep, reduced ability versus reduced sleep need. But what's happening really is there's a worsening with age. And this is correlated with deterioration of your central nervous system. In other words, your nervous system is your reflexes, your ability to react. We'll talk about the autonomic nervous system a little bit more in detail. Just your general nervous system, which comprises your brain and your nerves, the nerves that are voluntary, the nerves that are involuntary, those sorts of things. There's a general deterioration with age, which basically means if you can keep your CNS intact and healthy, that you're going to have some reflex improvements going the other direction, meaning your sleep will probably increase and you will have better quality sleep, basically. So how do you keep your nervous system healthy? So obviously, these things are not going to be, some of them are not going to be surprising. Exercise daily, try to sleep well. Of course, these go hand in hand. If you have a healthy nervous system that's young, your nervous system is going to be able to cycle and go through various different upregulation and downregulation. In other words, it's healthy, so you're probably going to sleep well. Play sports or exercise reflexes, so things like tennis, hand-to-eye coordination is going to keep the nervous system healthy. Making sure you get 20 minutes of downtime during the day, so you get some relaxation during the day. Balancing exercises, so they have those balance balls that you can practice on, especially as you get older. It's important for many, many reasons to improve your balance. And the reason is that it's related to your cutaneous nerves. In other words, the nerves in your legs and in your musculature, in the central part of your body, as well as your inner ear, as well as your brain. Everything, there's a whole bunch of nerves that are associated with improving your balancing. And so it's important, of course, especially because you don't want to fall as you get older, to spend time practicing balancing. One of the things that a lot of people leave out is working on lateral types of movements. A lot of times when people are exercising, they're just focusing on moving forward, doing, curls forward, presses, and they're not focusing on when they're moving, they're doing legs, they're doing this, but they're not necessarily going sideways. So the muscles that are related to sideways lateral movements are important to keep in good shape. So just walking is not necessarily going to do that, but you can walk sideways. Of course, there are many different kinds of exercises that allow you to move laterally, but to focus on making sure you're working all the musculature. And with balancing exercises, of course, you do that. I wrote here, learning to breathe. A lot of us are not breathing. Believe it or not, a lot of people don't know how to breathe. Of course, they can survive and they're breathing okay. But a lot of us don't understand the complexity of actual breathing because we're often so tense that we end up, maybe we're contracting our abdomen too much, maybe we're tense, and the musculature around the chest is condensed, which means we're not breathing properly. And believe it or not, there are, historically speaking, thinking of things like Tai Chi and Qigong, that spend quite a bit of time teaching people how to reclaim sort of this sense of breathing. There's one very good program that I listened to a long time ago with a Qigong teacher, a master. His name's Ken Cohen, which is an audio program that teaches you how to learn to feel the different breathing muscles. And it can really be a revelation for a lot of people to learn how to exercise, how to move some of these breathing muscles. This is another way to keep your nervous system healthy. Certainly Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, all of these are going to be very important to keep your nervous system young. Juggling is very good. Anything with hand-eye coordination is going to be good. Juggling is one of those amazing sort of hobbies that you can take up later in life that provides an enormous stimulus to your nervous system. And when you think about how interesting juggling is that it's purely your nervous system functioning. It's really not your brain. I mean, it's almost like you can't think that you're going to throw one hand up and one arm the other. It has to become this fluid movement that's basically controlled not from your brain, but sort of your body. And that's sort of your nervous system. And so when you can perfect this and you can work on juggling, this is an incredible way to keep your nervous system incredibly healthy. Obviously, meditation is going to be helpful, but that can also be, 20 minutes of prayer in a Judeo-Christian type of way. And resonant breathing, which I've spoken about several times, which is basically a way of breathing that is basically found to be in various different types of world traditions. When it comes to meditation, they found that most of these traditions ended up with sort of an ideal breathing frequency of sort of 6 breaths per minute. And when that happens, there's a synchronicity, there's a resonance, a matching of sort of the brain and the heart that basically relaxes the nervous system completely. There's an app called, I believe it's called Resonant. I always bring it up on my phone when I mention it. I think it's called Resonant. Let me take a look. And let's see. I moved everything. Oh, it's called Breathing App. And it basically gives you a tone that allows you to breathe in and then breathe out, and it basically sets it at a 6 frequency, which basically relaxes your entire body. It's a very interesting thing. So those are the ways to keep your nervous system healthy, and it's going to help you with staying younger as well as maintaining your healing, your ability to sleep as well. There are gender differences with sleep, different types of REM versus non-REM sleep, different types of endocrine functions. When you go to sleep, there is a lot of regenerative release of hormones that are reparative, that help heal you during your sleep. So if your sleep is disrupted, you're missing out on a key feature to recuperate. Oftentimes, menopause often starts with the occurrence of impaired sleep, and men as well get progressively worse sleep as they get older. So what's it associated with? Well, we probably have spoken about this before, but just your overall inflammation is going to increase when you're not getting enough sleep. And this inflammation can actually directly affect blood sugar. Your blood sugar can actually be in an abnormal state, inability to control blood sugar with just one night of poor sleep can cause your blood sugar to be off for more than a day, believe it or not. There's a higher risk of infection. There's movement of immune cells that are under the control of these cycles that we've been talking about. In other words, certain types of immune repair and immune fighting happen when it comes to these different circadian rhythms that we're talking about. So if you have poor sleep, you're at a much higher risk for infections. Obviously, psychiatric issues, cardiovascular issues. Obviously, that's probably partially related to inflammation because we've spoken about how inflammation, especially around the endothelial cells of the arteries, is important. Metabolic and hormonal. We spoke about blood sugar. And when you just look at overall morbidity, illness and mortality, death, people who have poor sleep have a much higher associated risk for disease and for death, all overall. Now, many of you probably know people who have sleep apnea, and with sleep apnea, it's sort of like almost like a case history of what can happen when people aren't sleeping well. Obviously, there are other issues that happen there. There's often weight that's involved for quite a number of people. So there's obesity on top of that. But once the sleep becomes disrupted, their blood pressure goes up, their cardiovascular risk goes up. Certainly, their overall inflammation, which is already high from obesity, continues to go up. And there's a great bit of morbidity and mortality associated with sleep apnea. It's a terrible thing. Okay, so we've spoken about the nervous system now, and we're going to talk about the nervous system a little bit more. Now, I've spoken about before the parasympathetic, which is the rest or recharge, and the sympathetic, which is the fight or flight. So we know that the nervous system, generally speaking, simplistically speaking, I should say, is divided between these two things. And what happens is your vagus nerve, which is a nerve that basically runs from your brain all the way down, and we've spoken about it several weeks ago, it turns out that the more vagal tone you have, the more responsive your vagus nerve is, the better your sleep is. And when it comes to that, your vagal tone increases up until around the age of 20. Unfortunately, around the age of 20, it starts to decrease. So unfortunately, we're set up for having, there are obviously other issues involved with sleep, as we've spoken about, but your vagus nerve is very important for that. So if we can improve our vagal tone, then we have the ability to improve our sleep. So what can we do to improve our vagal tone? So as I said, it increases to the age of 20 and then declines, but there's vagal nerve stimulation that you can do. And this is another technique that can help improve your overall health and your ability to sleep and your ability to relax, believe it or not, because it creates resilience in your nervous system. When your vagus nerve is not able to respond well, your body is not in a, I guess you could say, a resilient state. It's not able to move and sway with the stresses and allowing you to relax. So there's several things that can help with vagus nerve stimulation. They actually have devices now for various diseases that actually stimulate the vagus nerve, but resonant breathing, which we spoke about before, also activates the vagus nerve. Cold water on your face. So there is something to, when you're tired and stressed, to go into the bathroom and just splash cold water on your face. And what's happening there is the vagus nerve, again, think about it, is running from all the way through your body, supplying a lot of the organs as it runs all the way down. And you're basically, with cold water, it's affecting your entire body. Gargling loudly, slower exhalation, in other words, giving a sigh. When you do that, you feel this relaxation. Why is that? Because of this vagus nerve stimulation. And then anything that sort of will cause salivation. In Qigong and other ancient modalities, they would move their tongue around their mouth to stimulate salivation. They didn't know anything about the vagus nerve back then, but they knew that somehow moving and getting the fluids in the mouth going was somehow related to balancing out the body. And that's probably, so they sort of knew, they probably were, because they were so sensitive to what was going on inside their body, they knew that this sort of salivation phenomenon most likely was relaxing or doing something to the rest of the body. And now we know it's basically because of vagal nerve stimulation. All right, so we've spoken about the overall nervous system, how you want to, move, you want to make sure that you're exercising with good hand and eye coordination, those sorts of things. Now we're going to move on to, inflammation we've already spoken about. So let's basically move on to just general ideas in aging. Just do a time check here. So the sleep-wake organization, basically with aging, sleep onset changes, body, just in general, when we're talking about sleep, there's various types of things that happen. Well, first, melatonin starts to increase early in the evening, getting your body ready for sleep. That's why some people take melatonin to sort of enhance this preparation for sleep. So normally this is related to the way the light is, the sun is going down and your body starts releasing melatonin, which basically means that if you are exposed to abnormal types of light, like blue light, which we'll talk about later, or very, very bright lights in the evening, that's going to suppress the natural melatonin release, which is basically getting your body ready for sleep. And if that's not secreting, then you could have potential problems. Obviously, motor activity or your general movement internally is going to slow down your body temperature and sleep onset. These clock genes, so we mentioned that the light comes in, it activates this what's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus in your brain, which then sends out these messages. And there's gene expression that's related to this clock, and that can be impaired with aging. And remarkably, these genes are also associated with your immune system. So these precise clock genes are going to have be impaired somewhat as you get older, especially if you're not paying attention to keeping all of these systems in order. So I could spend a whole class going through sleep hygiene, and we'll review that, but to be able to help you get a better night's sleep, and again, we will talk about that, but if I don't mention the vagus nerve, I don't mention keeping your nervous system in shape, then it's of no use. You really need to look at this from multiple perspectives, because if you ignore that and just focus on the things that happen around sleep, then you're not really going to get anywhere. And remarkably, your immune system is directly related to this cycle. So what does good sleep do? Well, it improves immune function. It reduces infection risk. And these have all been shown in medical studies, and it actually has shown improved vaccination response, something that maybe many of us are concerned with these days. They did studies that showed for flu vaccine that flu vaccines there's better uptake, and believe it or not, there are actually time changes that might be associated with improved vaccination response. Like it might be that the type of cycle that you're in early in the morning, in terms of how your immune system fluctuates according to this clock, they showed that vaccinations of flu that were done in the morning people had better immunity to those vaccinations. So there's some very fascinating things that are associated with all of these cycles. And it's probably going to be in the next, over the next years, that certain medications probably most definitely have a better response, taking them at different times of the day. So there's going to be this sort of branch of medicine is really going to really become refined, and we're going to learn a whole lot more about how important these cycles are. And obviously, the whole purpose of tonight's talk is to make you realize how important this is by looking at it from different perspectives. But keep in mind that this is an incredibly, from a scientific perspective, an incredibly superficial overview of the science, which basically means that as the years go by, this is going to become something that's going to be very exciting because we'll be able to improve the ability of medications to be more effective. Obviously, we mentioned vaccinations as well. And general medicine will be concerned with timing of medications, quality, making sure that the quality of these cycles, the circadian rhythms are preserved, and all those sorts of things. So we know that we need to get a good night's sleep. And again, even if, just to mention what I mentioned at the beginning, even if we think that our sleep is decent, it's still something that we should concern ourselves with, maybe improving if we can, or maybe helping people around you. Obviously, noise is going to be a problem. There's also noise that can help. Obviously, there are noise generators, that generate white noise. Sometimes it can help people sleep. Temperature, there are various temperature ideals for people. So, you should experiment with temperature. There are some really interesting devices now for regulating body temperature during sleep, and one's called a chili pad that you put it under your bed and it circulates cold water. People sleep better when their core temperature drops a little bit. Chili pads are also good for if your spouse likes a temperature different to sleep in than you do. You can regulate the temperature up or down, and it's just sort of a thing, as I said, a thing that runs underneath your bed that circulates not just cold water, but it can circulate hot water as well. Blue light is very, very damaging. So looking at TV screens, looking at doing nighttime reading on a Kindle, as an example. Even the backlit Kindles do release a decent amount of blue light. These are going to affect your sleep. And specifically, one of the things that they do is they suppress that melatonin release. So the melatonin release really starts not too soon after the sun goes down. So if you are staring at a bright screen, 7, 8 o'clock at night, that could still potentially affect the melatonin level in your body, which could affect your overall sleep. So most sleep experts recommend at least 2 hours before going to sleep, avoiding any sort of screen time at all. Obviously, there are people wear blue blocker sunglasses once the sun goes down to help with making sure there's this natural release of melatonin to help with their sleep, and that's become quite popular these days. So light is an incredibly important thing. I might add that blue light is also dangerous to your skin. Most of the blue light that you get is from the sun, but the blue light even from screens can damage your skin. It actually depletes the antioxidant, all the antioxidants in your skin that are normally there to provide some protection against light and environmental insults, is actually depleted with blue light, which basically means that this depletion that happens means that you're now susceptible to more of the negative effects of blue light. And blue light is very similar to ultraviolet light A, which is actually very age-inducing. In other words, it can damage the collagen and make you wrinkle more. So I hate to scare you with all this, but blue light is not good for how you look either. So you really should be aware of blue light and screens. There are various filters. There's an app call on your computer screen. Well, on the iPhone, essentially, I believe they now, as the sun goes down, it actually lowers the blue light on the screen. On your computer, there are various programs. There's one called Flux that will reduce the blue light coming out of the screens. You can buy a night light if you want to read at night that has no blue light in them. I actually have one. That's one of the best things I bought this year to be able to read before I go to sleep. That it doesn't have, it gives off sort of a yellowish light, but it almost feels like you're reading by candlelight. It's definitely bright enough. So you can get these reading lights that don't have any blue light in them. So these are things to think about if you like to read before you go to sleep. Speaking of reading, the bed is only for two things. One is for sleep. I think you know what the other one is, and it's not reading. So if you want to read before you go to sleep, you should really sit in a chair and do that, because you really need to make sure your bed is just associated with sleeping, especially if you're having trouble with that. Your stomach should be empty. We've spoken about quite in detail, actually, over the weeks. We've spoken about intermittent fasting and how it's nice to have, more than 12 hours between your last meal and your first meal. And it always is better, in my experience and in my patients' experience, if you stop eating sooner than the next day going later. I still feel like breakfast is an important meal, and for most people. So if you can eat your dinner, an hour earlier and then eat your breakfast at normal time, you can get more than 12 hours in usually. And that's even better for your sleep, because if you are, when you sleep, you're basically in sort of a detox mode. So you shouldn't really be in that digest mode. So you want to have an empty stomach. Obviously, exercising right before you go to sleep, it could be a problem. Racing thoughts. How do you get rid of racing thoughts? Well, one way is actually just to write them down. If you're in bed and you're always thinking about what you're going to have to do tomorrow and what you're worried about tomorrow, believe it or not, a lot of people have made to-do lists and just write things out, get them out of your head, and put them on paper so that they don't waste time in your head, and they are they are out of your head essentially. Working on a ritual, maybe that ritual is taking a bath, drinking some herbal tea, reading your favorite book, doing a nighttime prayer, and then going to sleep. But getting into this habit where it's many steps, and every night when you start that process, it's almost like you're training your body to say, okay, on the fourth step, I know I'm going to be in a relaxed state, and I'm going to slide into bed, and I'm going to go to sleep. So developing a nighttime ritual is also very, very important. So those are just basic ideas for sleep hygiene. And let's summarize basically what we spoke about today. Obviously, all of you before tonight's class, right? All of you knew that bad sleep equals bad health. My goal really was for you to understand how much more important it is than maybe you really think about. The other key thing that I wanted to focus on was the fact that, yes, we've spoken about sleep hygiene before, but sleep hygiene is really only one of the things that we should focus on when it comes to making sure that we have good sleep as we age, as we get older. And you do that by making sure that you're avoiding bad light. You make sure avoiding, we should really just call this light awareness. And the reason is because we've spoken about bad light, but we've also spoken about good light. We want to make sure that in the morning, in order to set our circadian rhythm going well, getting outside and getting natural light from the sun is going to set those things. The key is that blue light, which again, you're getting from the sun as well, you shouldn't be getting in the evening. So you should make sure that you have light awareness, let's call it, in the morning to get outside, in the evening to avoid working to get rid of those, and then to develop a system of exercise and lifestyle that's going to cultivate nervous system health, which is bodily awareness, hand-to-eye coordination, balance, meditation, relaxation, those sorts of things. And when you put all these three things together, that's going to prevent a lot of the age-related decline that we get in this circadian rhythm, and it's going to sort of upgrade our body so that we can maintain the systems and the rhythms and the clock that we have so that we can maintain our health in the most, optimal way. So that is what I wanted to talk about tonight. Next week, we are going to be talking about the latest generation in how to assess your gut health. And the reason that's important is because some of the tests, I'm going to be reviewing one of my patients' gut tests. And what's interesting about that is we sort of did this with a micronutrient test that we did, that I went through probably, I don't know, 10 or 20 weeks ago. But what the test basically showed with the circadian rhythm was how to understand micronutrients and how they relate to your health. And the same thing can be said about the new generation of gut tests, where we look at what does the microbiome show and how are those microbiome deficits. Well, first of all, what can we do to improve them? And two, how are they associated with autoimmunity? How are they associated with cardiovascular disease? All of these sort of how they're associated with neurological disease. All of these sorts of things can be directly related to the health of your gut. And by looking at one of the tests, you'll be able to see how important it is to be able to maintain your optimal health by making sure you're getting a diverse amount of different fibers and that sort of thing. So the test really just sort of allows you to see, just sort of like how we spoke about some of the details here about how sleep is affecting so many different things. Well, the same thing could be said about the gut, and the test really allows you to understand it in a real deep way. So I look forward to seeing you next week, and I really hope all of you stay well, and I appreciate everyone from attending tonight. And obviously, if anyone has any questions, you can actually just reply to the invite. My staff will send a email to me from that. And if you have any questions, always, or you can go to my Facebook page and you can search for me there and send me a message, and I'm happy to answer any questions. So wishing everyone a good night, and hope you enjoyed your time here tonight. And what can I say? I will see you. Oh, it looks like we have a couple chats here. Hold on. Okay, well, thanks, Shadi. I appreciate that. Thanks, Terry. And thanks, everyone, for your positive comments, and look forward to seeing you next week.